What's up, my know-it-alls? Welcome back to Star Trek Strange New Worlds. I tell you what, it isn't often that you get to have the treat of a bonus episode this week, but since due to San Diego Comic-Con they dropped the crossover episode over the weekend, we get another episode this week. I know I'm excited. Do me a favor, like and subscribe to the channel, please. It really helps us grow. Let everyone know that you are proud to be a member of the Know-It-All Nation. So, here we go. Without further ado, Star Trek Strange New Worlds, Season 2, Episode 8, Under the Cloak of War. So, this is a different episode. Of course, hot on the heels of last week's episode. I say last week's episode. Hot on the heels of the most recent crossover episode, which is much more lighthearted and, frankly, a comedy. This is a much darker look at Star Trek. One of the things I enjoy about this episode is, the episode focuses on PTSD and the aftermath of war, and I feel like in a world where we're always talking about canon and what that means and this and that, I love when we explore the corners of the Federation and Starfleet and Star Trek's universe. By the corners, I mean places where we don't normally go, though we've heard about. We've heard about the Klingon War in the abstract. We've heard about it through different people talking about their event, or that it even happened just as a historical event. It's like someone talking about World War II. It's a thing that happened, and that's it. So seeing it firsthand, I think, is a very interesting place to go storytelling-wise. So the episode starts with Pike has brought on Ambassador Dak'rah. Ambassador Dak'rah is a former Klingon general. During the war, he was a Klingon general. He's credited with they call him the Butcher of Jagal. A few episodes back, we saw M'Benga using what's called he called Protocol 12, which was this. It was an enhanced. It gave you enhanced adrenaline plus pain inhibitors, thus allowing them to fight Klingons. And we saw Chapel and M'Benga do that. I think it was the first episode of the season. And so it was one of those things where we sat here and you look at that and you sit here and go, what in the world would precipitate the invention of such a thing? And they've told you a little bit about it, and you get the idea that this season we've gotten whole new layers to the characters of Chapel and M'Benga. And I feel like this is one of those times where you sit here and you go, okay, let's see what the story is they're going to tell us. The presence of the ambassador begins to get some people upset. Ortegas is in command at the time. She's at the con, and she's talking with Uhura, who is telling her basically, hey, listen, shouldn't we give peace a chance and this and that? Remember, most of Pike's crew they were on their 5-year mission. They didn't come back for the war, so they missed it. And then some of the rotation through did, i.e. M'Benga, Chapel, Ortegas, and I'm sure there's several others throughout the crew. But those are the big three that we deal with in this episode. And so as soon as they get on the bridge, he transports over. He wants to have a tour of the ship. And of course, he's got this very, Ortegas makes a comparison to the Dalai Lama. He's got this very, give peace a chance type attitude, talking about Dak'rah. And then they do an interesting thing, which is after our first encounter, you get a flashback. They intersperse these flashbacks throughout the episode. Specifically, the flashback takes you to the Battle of Jagal, or specifically Jagal itself. And according to everything, Jagal was a meat grinder, and you see that firsthand. And you see Chapel, and you see M'Benga, and Chapel's being assigned here for the first time, and she's been made the chief nurse, the head nurse. Of course, you see a familiar face. He's chief of medical for the base, and that's Clint Howard, who has been known for he's a Star Trek alum, who's been in several different things, both as a child actor and later on in life as an adult. And it's pretty cool to see kind of familiar faces. Again, always paying that homage forward to classic Star Trek. And so when you go into this world of the Klingon War, it's rough. Like, it's Saving Private Ryan meets Starship Troopers, meaning it's brutal. It's a side you don't see often of the Federation, But at the end of the day, and there's even a scene later where Mbenga's talking to this one officer, this one kid who they help, and he literally says to him, he's like, I didn't sign up for this, I had to be an explorer. And Mbenga's like, yeah, but you have to understand, if we don't hold the line here and stop them from taking this place, that's how it'll continue. It'll continue, and things are going to get even worse. And and again, this thread and through line throughout the episode is very much about dealing with its PTSD. It's dealing with the war. Then we cut to the present, and you see they bring Dak'rah through medical, and immediately Mbenga starts having an anxiety attack. A bad one. And it could be an adverse effect to using Protocol 12 as well over prolonged periods of time. You find out in the past, there's this Andorian who shows up, and he's been assigned by Starfleet with a special unit to go in and take out the leadership of the Klingons on Jagal. And he approaches Mbenga, and he's like, yeah, no, they told me that you would say no. And he's looking for Protocol 12 or the Ghost, as they called apparently Mbenga. So apparently there's this dark side to Mbenga where he used to be a hitman, or not just a hitman, but like special forces type stuff, and eventually turned, and he says flat out, he goes, I've shifted from, I found it easier or better to save lives than take them. And I get it. I get it. We go back and forth again between the past and the present and whatnot. And so then back in the present, you see this moment where Pike comes in and he says, hey, we're going to be hosting this dinner. Are you going to be okay? You don't have to come if you don't want to. And they both say, no, we're going to be okay. That's Chapel and Mbenga. They're both like, no, we'll be all right. And you go to the dinner, and at the dinner, as the Mbenga's approaching, Ortegas is outside the door, and she's like, I don't know what to do. By the way, I love Ortegas. The actress is just chef's kiss, because she's so nuanced, and I really do love that. And Mbenga's like, you could have said no. She's like, you could have said no, and he's like, yeah, but I can't. The whole time he's trying to put on a brave face, and Mbenga's trying to put on a brave face, saying, I'm going to conquer this. And you find out that the sayings are that dude killed his own officers to cover his escape. And that is the mantra that Dak'rah has been going through. I learned, he's got this whole thing. I through war, I got better. I learned, and it changes you, and this and that, and it's all these big highfalutin things of it was traumatizing and blah blah blah, and Mbenga doesn't buy it. Nobody buys it. Correction. And at the same time, Pike asks some really good and very interesting philosophical questions, which is, who has the right to offer forgiveness? The Federation's built on second chances and people being better, and so what do you do when that's not easy, and when it's an enemy? Who sets those standards? And then we go to the past, and you start to see that the things they had to do. The young officer that Chapel and Mbenga are trying to help to save this kid, and literally at one point Chapel has to put her hands in his chest and massage his heart to get it going again. And then they throw the kid right back into a war scenario. Starfleet says we have to push now, or it's now or never. And apparently Dak'rah General then gave the order that says anyone who's not Klingon must die. And they start killing women and children. They're killing civilians. They're pushing back that hard. And so then at that point, there's transporters coming, and you get this mantra. And I love what they did, because so if you ever see those war movies, like Vietnam style war movies, you see sometimes people who are working those camps where the evacs are coming through. And sometimes it's just like the droning of the helicopters and this, and it just becomes, and so their version of that is the transporter voice that's constantly droning on about, incoming transport, incoming transport, incoming transport. And it's just such a it's almost like a dizzying thing. And they overlay that with after, because finally during the dinner, Ortegas has to walk out. She can't do this anymore. And so Chapel takes the opportunity to go check on her, and Pike says, why don't you go check on them both and make sure everything's okay. And so finally, at one point, the Klingon Dak'rah says, he stops as Mbenga's about to leave, and he says to him, I hear you partake in this, in full body contact, essentially Klingon jujitsu. That's what it boils down to. And he's like, I'd love to have an opportunity to practice. I don't get really much practice. And he's like, okay, sure, I'd love to. Well, yeah. He keeps it together very well. He leaves. Meanwhile, Spock tries to console Chapel and is constantly being rebuffed. And I don't know that his burgeoning relationship with her, on top of his exploration of his human side, on top of, I think I'm seeing the strain. And if they don't eventually address it, I do see that eventually breaking apart. I think I said that last week, or after the last episode. Then we cut to them practicing, having their jujitsu thing, M'Benga and Dak'rah. And as they're doing their thing, and it's very interesting, they each talk about where they've come from, and eventually M'Benga asks, so is it true? And Dak'rah tries to say yes. What the story he tells is, my officers, 3, and he names them, didn't they wanted to kill indiscriminately, this and that. I was done with it. It changed me. I couldn't allow it anymore, and so they had to be stopped. And he says, who fought the worst? And he's like, Commander Kiff. And he's like, Captain Kiff or something. And he's like, oh, okay. And meanwhile, so dude says to him, listen, we're gonna have a heart. People are gonna see that we are old war dogs, and we have. He didn't say those words. It's basically what he's saying. I'd like your help so that we can do better, so that we can be better. So help me if people see us getting along, he's like, you want to be friends with me? And eventually, M'Benga leaves, and he goes to a sonic shower, and that's when they get the whole incoming transport thing. And you get to see the kid. That's when the kid who they saved, who she massages heart, gets sent back into the meat grinder. Eventually, the entire mission is falling apart. And apparently M'Benga, who still has the Protocol 12, this is in the past, he takes the Klingon knife from the fallen Andorian, and he decides to put up armor and go, and he's going. And he's going to go fight. He's going to do what he can to end this and finish the mission. And Chapel sees him, and she says, listen, we got to go. They're coming in with a convoy, and he says, don't, you can track me with this. Don't transport me out until you absolutely have to. And then we get this vision of him fighting Klingons. Memory. Eventually, Una comes to Pike and says, listen, and this is, by the way, this is what a first officer does. As a former first officer myself in Starfleet, the International Fan Club of the U.S.S. StarQuest, I remember my job was often to give advice based on things I saw, morale and whatnot. So that's what Una does. Una comes up and says, hey, listen, we need to cut our trip short. We need to cut through the nebula, go through the thing. This is not good. And for us to put our people through this kind of mental torture and anguish is not appropriate. I don't like it. And so Pike concedes. He's like, okay, all right. And against his better judgment, but at the same time, he's not inhuman. Pike understands what these people are going through, and so he decides, okay, no, we have to, yeah, we'll cut it short. So that's when Dak'rah goes to see him, and says to him, hey, goes to see M'Benga, and says to M'Benga, listen, my trip's getting cut short. I really wanted this opportunity, and M'Benga's like, I will never be friends with you. This will never happen. You don't understand what that did to everybody, this and that. And he walks away, and dude follows him, and M'Benga opens up a case where he's got the knife, the Klingon knife. You then get to see the fullness of the moment when he's fighting, what we saw in flashes. M'Benga's the one who killed Dak'rah's people. M'Benga was going after Dak'rah. Dak'rah lived and covered his escape. Come to find out, his cowardice by claiming he's the one who did blah blah blah. M'Benga is the butcher of Jagal, and that revelation was unbelievable. And then they cut to, and I like that they did it this way because it allows for interpretation. They cut to Chapel coming into medical, and she sees their silhouettes through that foggy glass around M'Benga's office from the main medical, and she hears what looks like an argument, and then she sees dude fall over, and she walks in, and there he is on the floor, and then we cut to her giving her side of the story to Pike and Una, and essentially saying, it's who knew. He must have been, he wanted some sort of acceptance, forgiveness, whatever. When Joseph wouldn't give it to him, he attacked him, and it was self-defense. And she stands by that story. And Pike eventually goes, and he's like, okay, hey, things happen. You never know, people, whatever. What are you gonna do? It's a very confusing scenario. And so Pike goes to visit Mbenga, and he says to him, what? I would hope that after all these years, we'd know each other. You'd tell me the truth, right? Like if there's anything to tell. And he's like, yeah, this and that. And eventually Mbenga says, you have to understand, we do know each other, but until you've walked in my shoes or know what I know or seen what I've seen, we will never understand. And he's like, what are you trying to say? And he says, I did not start the fight, but I'm happy he's dead. And it's a very ambiguous, it's an ambiguous lesson that I get. And this is unlike so a lot of The Next Generation was very much about always taking the high road. And I kind of like and appreciate this story where there is no high road. It feels more genuine. Not that I ever thought The Next Generation was disingenuous, but yeah. Anyway, there you go. Now you know. And if knowing's half the battle, you're halfway to being a know-it-all yourself. So, what's the know-it-all index for this episode? This was a good one. This was good. I liked it. I liked this episode a lot. I'm gonna rein it back, and we're gonna go an 8. It's a nice, solid, hard 8 for me. I enjoyed the episode. I thought there were things to glean. You got to peel away more layers of characters. I would love to see more Pike stories of late, but at the same time, I'm really enjoying the stories they're telling. So, yeah, comment below. Let me know what you thought of the episode. All right, guys, I can't wait to see you next week. Never forget, everyone loves a villain.